Hi, seventh graders in Clinton. Today we are on lesson 137, and you are to be reading pages 286 to 290. 286 to 290. We're going to talk about the expansion of Russia today. You know, we're still talking about imperialism, and yesterday we talked about the Ottoman Empire and how it declined. It became Constantinople became Istanbul. And do you remember the two places that it lost control over? Anybody remember? It was the Balkans and then also the Black Sea. Remember, Russia took control over the Black Sea. So today, I want you to think about these questions as we discuss Russia. How did Napoleon's invasion affect Russia? Remember, he went to Egypt to conquer it. It didn't work out. And then also, how successful were Russian imperial reforms and what became of the popular opposition movements in the 19th century Russia? So, most of Russia's population at this time were serfs. Serfs were peasants, or the people that were the lowest of the low. They worked the land. They were the backbone of Russia, but they were really, really poor. And remember, a serf back then was tied to the land. So if the land was sold, the serf went with the land. S-E-R-F, not serf. So that person was tied, like I said, tied to the land. That person could never leave the land that it was on. And I mean, he could not marry somebody from another place. He could not marry up. He had to marry his own. I mean, there was no hope for them, okay? So much of Russian population remained serfs who grew increasingly impatient at the status quo. I mean, can you imagine being in a place and just knowing that you had no hope of becoming something better? Okay, and so one of the leaders there was a person by the name of Catherine the Great. She was German, and she married a German who was heir to the throne in Russia. And what she did is she even expanded Russia. Russia moved west. She seized the Ottoman land and partitioned Poland, and then also she just kind of tried to expand it a little bit more. Now, if you look at Russia on the map now, Russia's huge. There's a lot of land and things like that, and that had a lot of her doing. She was the one that changed the rule of the serfs being tied to the land. She said, okay, they're still serfs. That's not going to change. But if I wanted to sell the land, then these people could stay here. So she made a different rule, kind of like untied them, okay? And then when she died, Alexander I came into power. We're not going to talk a lot about him, but he came into power and he expanded Russia a little bit. Like I said, the reform, don't forget, this is very important, Catherine made it illegal to sell serfs separate from the land. So when Alexander died, his son didn't want to be czar. He was like, nah, not gonna do it. You know, so the other son, Nicholas, is like, I'll do it. And Nicholas I came into power. Now, a lot of people did not want him to be in power. They didn't like him whatsoever. And so, hold on, let me pull this up. So a group of people, these were, they were known as the Union of Salvation. Okay, and this is 1816. The Union of Salvation, and they were a moderate wing group known as the Northern Society. Group of people, and they did not, so during this conflict, when Nicholas came to power and all this, confusion of who's going to be the next czar, they decided to sneak in there and kind of cause a little bit of problem. They wanted to take control of Russia. They wanted to seize power and be in charge. And so they took 3,000 men of these people who would follow him and went into the Senate Square, and they refused to pledge their allegiance to Nicholas. They said, nope, we're not going to do it. And they stood there on the ground. It's like doing a, protest. They were like, no, no. And then they thought that people from like other places were going to come and help support them. So even though they had these 3,000 men, they thought there were going to be more and more people to overpower Nicholas I and the people there on the throne. It didn't happen. The people didn't come. And so it took about 3 weeks. Nicholas was able to capture them. And this is called the Decembrist Revolt. The Decembrist Revolt. And captured them, took their leaders. Actually, the top 2 leaders that started, they just vanished. They went away. It's like either they defected or disappeared. They probably knew that they were going to lose and probably lose their head too. And so they took off. Nice leaders, huh? Anyway, the other leaders that were there, there are 5 other men that were there, was going to be hung. And according to legend, Russia had a thing that if you were to be hanged and the rope broke and you fell or you didn't die, then you couldn't be hanged again because it was like a sign. They should live. And these 5 Decembrists were hung, and all 5 of them fell. Their rope broke, fell, and they just got up. But Nicholas I decided not to honor the tradition, maybe because he was mad, whatever, I can just see it. And then he decided to order new ropes, and then he hung these men a second time. This time they died. They died, unfortunately. So that was the Decembrist Revolt. That is something I want you to remember too. Nicholas, he opposed groups that were more popular. He started anarchy, and then after him, we'll probably talk a little, after him, then you have Alexander II. Alexander II, he abolished serfdom. He freed peasants, and he did not enjoy improved conditions. And then another thing that you'll be reading will be that Alexander III, he suppressed and censored, persecuted those that were considered threats. Just like anybody, just like the Decembrist rebellion. Anytime he thought someone was going to threaten him or do something against his power, he got rid of him. And then you have invasion of Napoleon. Now this is a funny story because Napoleon wanted to conquer the world, and he did a lot. He conquered a lot. But he went into Russia, and this was the biggest mistake of Napoleon in France, because Russia is very, very cold. Very, very cold. And if you're not used to the cold like the Russians are, it's going to kind of, shock you. And so this was a catastrophic defeat for France. They got stuck in the winter, and a lot of them died because of the cold, or a lot of them I lived in Chicago. I didn't live in Chicago, but I lived in Indiana, and I lived in Minnesota. Minnesota is probably one of the coldest places in America that you can get, other than Alaska. It would get so cold that it hurt, and you couldn't barely walk. I can't barely walk now, but I could back then. And then if you're walking in snow and you're bringing your legs up, and then you're afraid you could fall off ice. But there was a rule at college, which is crazy, that we weren't allowed to go out if it was below 0. If it was 0 degrees, we had to go out visiting and inviting people to church. But if it was below 0, forget it. Well, 0 degrees, it could be 0 degrees and then 25 degrees wind chill factor. That wind would blow on you, and it was like icicles, and it hurt so badly. So I could just imagine being there trying to fight, and then your body, you get so tired, you just want to sit. And there's times that I would just like sit in the snow because I was so tired. I didn't want to move anymore. Ooh, my hair looks gross. I didn't want to move anymore, and I would just be like, so if anybody knows what it's like to live in the Chicago area or anything like that, the wind is the worst. So they're in Russia. They're trying to conquer Russia. Not gonna happen. And you know who else made that same mistake? Is Hitler. You would think that Hitler would learn from history because he tried to do the same thing with Russia. No, you don't. You don't do that. A lot of times they would send people to, I was going to say Timbuktu. We just learned about Siberia. Siberia was a place where they would send prisoners because it was so cold there. But sometimes they would send serfs there if they didn't. Catherine would send serfs there if she didn't want them anymore. Not a very nice person. So anyway, this one thing I want you to remember before we go is although Russia expanded by seizing land from weaker states, it fell further and further behind Western Europe economically. Okay, so that's it about Russia today. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and text me. I miss you. Remember, Wyatt, you do not have to do the activity book, the activity manual. You don't have to do it. Just send me questions about what you've learned. I miss you guys, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're making great choices. Seriously, if you need to talk or if you want to talk to me, FaceTime me, just let me know, and I will make a time for you. All right? Mwah.